Story time about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So a little background information. I was 13 and in 8th grade, and my sister was a senior in high school and she was 17. And my sister always had a new boyfriend. Like after 3 months of dating somebody, they would break up and then she would be with a new guy a month later. And this started whenever she was a sophomore. So yeah, she had a lot of boyfriends. Anyway, so she had started dating this boy, and we're gonna call him Ben. Well, lucky for Ben, whenever they started dating was right around the time when we were supposed to go on our vacation that we take every year. So my mom and dad said that he could come with us. So my sister, who we're gonna call Emily, she decided to bring Ben, and I decided to bring one of my friends, Carly. We drove down, everything was good for the first 2 days, and usually what would happen on this vacation is my dad would end up staying at the hotel and doing work while we were all out doing stuff. So my mom, Ben, and Emily were all out drinking at the bar 24/7. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So like I said, Emily, Ben, and my mom were out drinking 24/7 at the bar. And since this was a vacation that we took every year, my sister already knew a bunch of people down there. The one night my mom started feeling really sick at the bar, so Ben offered to take her back to the hotel. And at this time, my friend, my dad, and I were all down at the buffet in the hotel. So Ben took my mom upstairs to our hotel room, and my dad was like, "Oh, do you guys want to walk down to the fair?" We said yes, so he told us to go upstairs and get his wallet. So my friend and I go up in the elevator to our room, and I want to say this was about 20 or 30 minutes after Ben and my mom had went upstairs. So we get into the room, we hear the shower running, which was weird because we didn't think anybody was there. So instead of me calling my dad because it might have been a murderer, I go, and the door slightly creaked open, so I look through the door, and obviously I could hear you know what, but hers and his clothes were on the floor. Like for part 3.
Imagine your father asking you to help him install a cellar door only to be locked inside by him for the next 24 years of your life. Elizabeth Fritzl was freshly 18 and ready to leave the nest when one day in 1984, her father, Joseph Fritzl, asked her to help him install the door in the basement of their home in Austria. Unaware of his horrific intentions, Elizabeth obliged. As they finished and she was heading out, he suddenly covered her face in a cloth soaked in ether. For the next 24 years, Elizabeth had to endure suffering that no one could fathom. Joseph convinced his wife, other children, and their neighbors that Elizabeth ran away and joined some religious cult. They believed it because she had previously run away and stayed with a friend for 20 days when she was 15 to get away from her father's abuse, which started when she was 11. Police found her after those 20 days and brought her back home. If it wasn't terrible enough being forced to endure the blazing summers and catching rats with her bare hands, she was also repeatedly abused by her own father over the years of captivity. Initially, he tied her up with an iron chain so that she could barely move, but it caused trouble during the horrendous activities he put her through, and he removed it months later. For the first 5 years in the basement, she was all alone. He assaulted her at least 3,000 times in those 24 years, which resulted in her birthing 7 children. She gave birth to all her children with no medical help for almost 12 years. Joseph provided her with just a disinfectant, a dirty pair of scissors, and a book on childbirth. One of her children died prematurely due to difficulty breathing just 3 days after his birth in 1996. When the baby started to come, Elizabeth tried to end it all, but looking at her kids, she had purpose to live after the initial years of being alone. Joseph held control over her by threatening to end the lives of her and her children if they ever tried to escape. He would also turn off the lights in the basement for days on end so that she'd be in complete darkness. 3 of her children were in the basement with her, while the other 3 mysteriously appeared on the doorstep of Joseph and Rosemary, Elizabeth's mother, as per his planning. He doctored letters to Rosemary from Elizabeth saying that she was well but couldn't take care of the children. One day, Elizabeth's oldest daughter, Kirsten, who was 19 at the time, became extremely ill and needed immediate hospitalization. This is when Elizabeth pleaded with her father to get Kirsten medical attention. Joseph Fritzl, who had never shown mercy in those 24 years, surprisingly took Kirsten to the hospital. This is when things took a turn. So my daughter, 16, has had a best friend named Mare since she was 9 years old. They were so close that Mare had a key to our house and everything. Sometimes she would come over when my daughter wasn't even around because that's how close she was to the rest of our family. She even went with us to family reunions. Well, recently, Mare got a boyfriend. She would bring him around our house sometimes and I could tell that my daughter had a crush on him. But I assumed it was a small innocent crush and nothing would come of it. Well, one day, Mare pulled into our driveway like a crazy woman and accidentally hit our garage. When I came out, she had boxes of stuff and was shaking so bad that she could barely walk. When I looked inside the boxes, they were all my daughter's stuff from over the years. I'm talking about toys that she still had from when they were 9. I didn't know what happened, but I could tell that she was distraught, so I helped her get all the boxes out of the car and pulled her inside for a cup of tea. After about 15 minutes, she said, "Did you know?" Turns out that my daughter had slept with her boyfriend multiple times and that she found out by a voicemail my daughter left on her boyfriend's phone and Mare saw and listened to it. When I confronted my daughter, she had no defense. I asked her what was next and she said that she was going to get with him because if she didn't, they ruined 2 relationships for nothing. I was and still am appalled, and that was 5 months ago. Soon my family and I are going on a family vacation and all my other children's partners are invited. However, I told my daughter that hers wasn't. She blew up at me and then cried, asking when I'm ever going to forgive her. I told her it would have been one thing if she had slept with her boyfriend once. It still would have been terrible, but at least she could have learned from her mistake and grown. Instead, she slept with him multiple times, and the fact that she's still dating him proves that she isn't sorry for what she did. My husband says that this treatment of her relationship is only going to cause strain on our own, but I just can't believe how selfish and cruel she's become. I've spent thousands of dollars on this trip. I think I have the right not to invite people I don't want there. And I'm sorry if 5 months of her new boyfriend isn't going to erase the 7 years of friendship with Mare. I still talk to Mare sometimes, and she's doing a lot better now, but when it first happened, her mental health was ruined. And even as she's doing better and going to therapy, the mental effects of this level of betrayal is probably going to last years to fully get over. She says she's still hurt by what happened. Every time I look at my daughter, I'm honestly disgusted. This is not the type of person I raised her to be, and she's not sorry for any of it. I refuse to walk around on eggshells around my daughter and her boyfriend for a vacation I'm paying for and chaperoning for. Just seeing them together makes me sick. And by disgusted, I meant her decision making, not her as a whole, because despite everything, she's still my child. Also, I've learned to be cordial around the boyfriend when she's talking about him, but anything beyond that I've been struggling with. Am I the asshole for not accepting my child's relationship? I live with a roommate and her 3-year-old child. My roommate is a 4th-year medical student and is really struggling, having to balance with the child, intense study workload, chores and part-time jobs to afford rent, babysitter and necessities. On the day of the biggest exam of her entire degree, her babysitter canceled last minute. She was absolutely frantic and hysterically called every one of her contacts to help. Of course, she asked me. She has asked me to babysit before and I always give her stern no. It's not the time that I need to spend, since I'm perfectly fine with swapping around chores, but the principle that I must be responsible for the child for the duration. For example, if the child hurts himself, no matter how badly, it would be on me. And I refuse to take the responsibility for something like that, so I always refuse to babysit. She begged and begged me, and since the journey to her exam is almost 2 hours away and she needed to go now, she just said, "I don't fucking care," and left the house. Frankly, I found this quite disrespectful as it's trying to push me to babysit without my consent. Right after she left, I grabbed my coat and also left. She was starting her car when she saw me and asked what I was doing. I told her that I was going to watch a movie. I lied. I just refused to babysit without consent. Her eyes dropped and I could see the tears forming as she started begging me more to help her. I still explained the same thing, that it's not the time or effort, but the responsibility. I live with her that she would sign a waiver that states that I'm 100% not responsible no matter what happens. Really struggling. I'm not an expert in law, but I'm not sure if a waiver is even legally enforceable. Even so, it still carries a responsibility on the day of the biggest exam of her entire degree. Eventually, she became quiet and started sobbing while hitting herself. She was absolutely frantic and respectfully as I can. Every one of her contacts I can help with that does not involve babysitting the child. She told me to fuck off, so I did, and I always give her stern no. It's not the time that I need to spend, since I'm perfectly fine with swapping around chores, but the principle that I must be responsible for the child for the duration. So, for example, if the child hurts himself, no matter how badly, it would be on me. And I refuse to take the responsibility for something like that, so I always refuse to babysit. And always she begged and begged me and wasted earlier to her exam a little bit 2 hours away and she needed to go now. I know the exam just said, "I don't fucking care," and left the house. Her entire Frankly, I found this quite disrespectful as it's trying to push me to babysit without my consent. But right after she left, I grabbed my coat and also left. She was starting her car when she saw me and asked what I was doing. Exam that she spent 2 years studying.
So this is how a prank call could lead to a shitty relationship. So this might sound immature, but one day my friend and I thought it'd be funny to make some prank calls, so we called this guy that she knew. The guy we prank called had a really good sense of humor about it, so he decided to keep messaging me after. I really just wanted attention and decided to keep talking to him. And then that's when we FaceTimed. He was so cute and we continued to talk back and forth. But I had to go on vacation with my family for a few days, so we couldn't meet up quite yet. For this trip, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I said yes, but it wasn't long until he started to notice that I wasn't much of a simp for him. This really bothered him, but he ended up going about it all the wrong way. He decided to start making up stories in order to get attention from me. They would be about him or his family, and he would just do it to get me to listen to him more. And me being a dumbass just kind of ignored this red flag and continued on in the relationship. So one day he sent me a message saying some guys had beat him up, even though in a previous picture he showed me he didn't have any bruises. 3 days later, when I was outside of a club, he messaged me that he had a brain bleed which led to a stroke and now he has permanent brain damage. Like for part 2. Part 2, a prank call might lead you to a shitty relationship. I literally stormed out of the club crying my eyes out. Straight up thought my boyfriend had severe brain damage. He told me this was a condition that he was going to have to spend the rest of his life with, and I cried until the morning. Once it got to the next day though, I kind of noticed that he was talking normally, he wasn't in the hospital, so I got really sus about it. So I decided to go ahead and text his mom through my mom's phone, just to check in and see how he was doing from her perspective. And she was like, "Oh, he's fine, it was just a little scare." A little scare? Brain damage is a little scare? He was like, "In fact, he's out biking right now." So I just stormed out to go dig some more information. I found out he messaged my best friend telling her not to tell any of his friends about his seizure. So I decided to confront him and called him fuming. And at first he denied everything. He was like, "No, it's all true." So I told him I needed a break, and that's when he was like, wait. I googled some of the symptoms that I was having and that's what showed up. So you use Dr. Google. I just broke it off with him. If you guys have a story you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Insta. So this is a story time about my insane boss. So as a lot of you guys know, for 4 years, I worked as a Disney princess. It wasn't in Disney World or anything, it was a place locally. but it was still one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. Our boss, however, was her own kind of person. She was continuously going through cycles of being on and off with different boyfriends, and we could always tell if they were together or not by the way she treated us. Like, anytime there was a fight, she would always take it out on us. There was one time where we were just setting up in the back, and she walked back yelling, saying to stop gossiping about her. Literally none of us were even talking. She also had a massive issue with hoarding, so like all of the back rooms were filled with junk. She started to get a lot of calls from tax collectors, and she would always make one of us answer the phone. Eventually they started to stop by, and she would just go hide. A couple weeks after this, I came in for work, and the entire place had been robbed. Things stolen, glass everywhere. And she told me my social security had been taken. However, I knew something was off. Like and share and I'll do a part 2. Bye, Stu. So when I got into work that day and I just walked in and saw the glass everywhere, I just turned to her and I was like, what happened? Like, she wasn't explaining it to anyone. She was just sitting there at the desk acting like it was a normal day. And she was like, well, we were robbed and they took a lot of stuff. However, we made the observation that everything that was stolen was something that was broken. Almost as if the robber knew that that printer, that MP3 player, and that computer wasn't working. We also all made the observation that the glass was outside of the building. So it was like someone broke the glass from inside. The police were up there asking questions, and she was talking to them about how my social security was stolen along with a few of the other girls. But I guess it wasn't an issue since we were under 18. I don't know. But our theory was that she was probably cashing a check from that whole robbery thing, and that it was probably covered by insurance. Either way, she did not have the money to stay in business, so we had new management come in like real soon. I would also like to add that one of the things being hoarded at this place were Webkins. There was hundreds, as far as the eye can see. I have so many more stories coming, so don't be shy. Follow me. This is one of the biggest lies I ever told to get myself out of trouble. So back in high school, I used to run on the cross country team, but by no means was I competitive or athletic at all. I was honestly just there for the social aspect of it. All throughout my freshman year of high school, I would literally run to Cold Stone Creamery to get ice cream and bring it back to everyone on my bus. I don't know if that tells you what kind of athlete I was, but yeah. Somehow I still didn't get caught for doing this stuff, and by later in high school, my friends and I decided to pretty much never go. I mean, we would show up to practice, but we would wait until everyone was ahead of us and then turn the opposite direction and sprint to Starbucks. We literally did this almost every single day. And then we would call cute boys from other schools to come meet us over there. We would literally get coffee with them, go shopping, and then once we saw the team getting close again, we would just run back to school and pretend like we did the workout. Until one day, I was called down to the principals. They said it had to do with my cross-country attendance. Follow, share, and I'll tell you what happened next. So for starters, hopefully this makeup suits you a little bit better than the Tide Pod look did. But I'd also like to say that I've never gotten caught for anything before. At least, like, not school-wise. But I guess somewhere in this, the coaches started to take attendance mid-run. Sneaky. So I obviously had some absences. However, it was just me and one other girl that was called down to the office. So when I went in to talk to her, the only thing that could come to my mind to explain the absences was that I had an injury and I wasn't included in the workouts, so I just left and the coaches must have forgotten. And she bought it. However, rip my friend. They actually had camera footage of her leaving, so it wasn't like there was anything I could do to get her out of it. She got 3 days of detention, I believe, and I just went back the next day like nothing was wrong. But I ended up getting into a lot more trouble that I didn't actually get caught for, and that'll be next. Also, if you like these contacts, they're from TTDI. I got an adorable package in today, and you can use code MINICOOPERLIZ for 10% off. Follow for more story times.
Storytime about how I woke up to my best friend having a seizure. A little background information. So my close friend invited me over to his house to spend the night, and we're gonna call him Jay. Well, Jay and I got to his house, and his parents are really strict, so he had to sneak me in. So he told me to wait by the garage. And as soon as he opens the front door to his house, I hear his parents screaming. So he's inside fighting with his parents. I'm outside freezing my ass off. So an hour later, he comes out to get me, walks me through the garage, and I have to hide in this crawl space. So while I'm hiding in this crawl space, him and his parents are still arguing. And his parents walk past where I was like 5 times. So his mom gets in the car and leaves. She said she was going to kill herself. His dad comes into the garage, starts crying. I literally witnessed him have a mental fucking breakdown. Then his mom came back, said that she hated everybody. So then Jay purposely bangs his head off of the kitchen table 2 times. So when he came into the garage to get me, he had an ice pack on his head. Then we snuck up to his room like for part 2. Part 2. So like I said, he rushes me up to his room because his dad was in the basement and his mom left again, threatening to kill herself again. And while we're upstairs, he starts taking dabs. And we're up for a little bit and then we go to sleep. So at like 8 in the morning, we both wake up. He's on his phone, I'm on my phone. We're not facing each other. And then all of a sudden, I feel the bed start to shake like a lot. So I turn over and this kid is having a full-blown fucking seizure. Like, he's foaming at the mouth. His eyes are literally rolling in the back of his fucking head. So I get up and roll him over onto his side because I didn't want him to start choking. And I'm fucking freaking out and don't know what to do because I wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place. And he's like making all these types of noises. So I go and I run down the hallway. I try to find his parents' room. And I open the door and have to wake them up dead out of their sleep. And I was like, your son's having a seizure. So his mom runs over to the room, and his dad's like, well, who the fuck are you? And why the fuck are you in my house? And I was like, your son told me that I could stay the night last night. Oh, like for part 3.
This is why you should always sit in the back seat. Vivian was spending a year in Korea when something terrifying happened. One night she was going out with her 2 roommates who spoke Korean, and at the end of the night they decided to get a taxi home. Vivian sat in the front and her 2 roommates sat in the back. This would be her first mistake. The driver spoke really good English and began telling jokes. Vivian found them really funny but soon realized that her roommates weren't laughing. In fact, they had a strange expression on their faces. Vivian said what's wrong, but they wouldn't answer. Suddenly one of her roommates said something to the driver in Korean and he pulled over on the side of the road. Vivian knew something was wrong. They weren't anywhere near their apartment, but her roommates got out of the taxi and started walking away quickly. Vivian paid the driver, then got out to follow them. And that's when she found out the truth. Her roommate said, "Did you hear it? It was coming from the trunk of the taxi. A woman's voice saying, 'Help me, help me.'"
Am I wrong for leaving my husband after I found out that he had cancer? So my husband and I had been married for about 10 years before we started becoming distant. A little while after, he actually cheated on me with one of my close friends. After that, nothing was ever the same between me and him. Now don't get me wrong, I still loved him, but things could never go back to the way they used to be. Eventually, he fell sick, started losing a lot of weight, having trouble breathing, getting random rashes on his skin. So we both agreed that he should go to the hospital to get checked. So he went to the hospital and had to wait a few days to get the results. A few days had passed, so he went back to the hospital to get his results. When he came back home, I asked him what his results were. He said everything was fine, there was nothing to worry about. Then he put his keys on the counter and hopped into the shower. A couple days before, I had lost my credit card. I looked everywhere for it, couldn't find it, but the only place I didn't look was my husband's car. So I grabbed his keys while he was in the shower and I went to his car to look for my credit card. I was thinking maybe it fell out of my wallet while I was sitting in one of the seats. While I was looking for the credit card, I found a folder from the hospital he just went to. When I looked inside the folder, there was his test result. It was a biopsy test that confirmed he had cancer. So I went back inside to confront him for lying to me. Come back for part 2. This is part 2 of the story of me leaving my husband after I found out that he had cancer. So after I found the positive test results in his car that confirmed he had cancer, I went back inside to confront him for lying to me. I was sitting down waiting for him to get out of the shower. But then I kind of decided that I didn't want to confront him. Our marriage was already going downhill and I was already having thoughts about leaving him anyway. I mean, he did cheat on me with my close friend. I know this might make me sound like a terrible person, but I didn't want to be there for him. I didn't want to be his main support system mentally or physically. And cancer is a lot to deal with. I didn't want to be in and out of the hospital, spending multiple days there, sleeping there, paying all of the bills myself. It would be too much for me. So I decided I was going to pack my things and leave without telling him when or why. And I mean, he didn't know that I knew he had cancer, so he wouldn't think that I was leaving him because of that. So I knew I needed to leave before he decided to tell me he had cancer, so it didn't look like I left him because of that. So the next day, he went to work, and then I went to work. As in packing all my stuff, and then I left. Afterwards, he kept begging me to come back, so I blocked him, and I haven't talked to him since.
Am I the a-hole for kicking my brother-in-law out after he referred to himself as the father of my child? Let me explain. I'm a 30-year-old female, and my wife is a 29-year-old female. We welcomed our son into the world a year ago, and both of our families are very accepting of us, but my wife's family has this weird obsession with passing on the family genes. So this made adopting out of the question very early on. My wife and I always wanted to start a family, but things got difficult when my wife found out that she was infertile. We knew that her family would be understanding, but I am terrified of pregnancy. My biological mom died in childbirth, which has led me to believe that I wouldn't hold a pregnancy very well. After a few months of brainstorming, my mother-in-law suggested that we do IVF, using my eggs, my brother-in-law's sperm, and let my wife carry the baby. Even though I was skeptical, I gave in because the plan hit all the marks. Her family got to pass on the genes, and my wife and I got to start a family. Plus, I didn't want to carry the baby. We went through extensive counseling and therapy to make sure everyone was on the same page and could handle it, and everything went great. My wife loved being pregnant aside from the morning sickness. Therapy to make sure everyone was on the same page and could handle it, and everything went great. My wife loved being pregnant aside from the morning sickness, and we were overjoyed to welcome our new baby boy in the winter. But a problem arose when we were preparing for my son's first birthday when my brother-in-law made a comment about how he should get a say in the planning as the child's father. I was shocked, I cringed, and I told him he wasn't. And told him that he was just providing a piece of him, and he looked me in the eye and said, "Yeah, so he's our child." My wife's jaw dropped and my mother-in-law wasn't making eye contact. I kicked him out of the house and told him that he couldn't come back until he apologized. But he got angry, which made my wife start to cry. She has always struggled with self-esteem, and this infertility really took a toll on her. For months, I've had to reassure her and tell her what an amazing mom she is. My sister-in-law later that day called me the B word. And I argued that my brother-in-law had no right saying any of that. But she kept yelling, so my wife and I had to cut off contact with her family. Brother-in-law signed away all of his rights and agreed multiple times he's just an uncle. But am I in the wrong for waiting for him to apologize?
Storytime about how I ruined my ex-best friend's relationship and reputation in 2 days. So a little background information, I was 14 in 8th grade. I was in a very toxic friend group of 3, and we all secretly talk crap about each other. So 2 of the girls in my friend group decided that they didn't want to be friends with me anymore, for absolutely no reason. The one girl texted me saying, I don't want to be friends with you anymore, and then the other girl literally just played along with it because she can't think for herself. She was like, yeah, I've been planning on doing this for like 2 weeks. So I got very embarrassed by this because they started going around the school telling everybody about it. And not to sound like that person, but I was really popular. I had a lot more friends than them, and the only reason why people liked them was because they were my friends. Anyway, so I started texting the boys that they liked. And I was like, hey, I think you should know that they've been talking to other people while they're talking to you. And I just thought that that was really wrong. And when they asked who, I gave them names of boys that they both used to talk to. And then when the girls texted me about it, like for part 2 about how I ruined my ex-best friend's relationship and reputation in 2 days. So like I said, I texted the boys that they liked saying that they were talking to other people. And then of course my ex-best friends got mad and then they started texting me about it saying, oh, why are you lying, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, honestly, I just think it's really wrong for you to try and play these boys who actually have feelings for you. Yes, I know I was a little crazy, but who isn't? Anyway, so then I decided to get my mom involved because I had been friends with these girls for a while. So my mom knew their parents very well. So I told my mom I was really worried about them because they were starting to get into really bad stuff and hanging out with the wrong crowd. So I couldn't be friends with them. And they tried to talk me into doing stuff. So then my mom called their parents. Well, then their mom started to drop them off and pick them up every day because they were grounded. Well, then their mom started to apologize to my mom because their kids were such bad influences on me. And then when everybody asked why we stopped being friends, I told them that they made fun of my grandma who isn't alive. And 4 years later, everybody still hates them. Storytime about the girl who was weirdly obsessed with my best friend. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 9th grade, and I went to a private school, so there was only one class per grade. So my best friend and I were in class together, and we're gonna call her Bella. And then there was this girl, Gabby, who had kind of been friends with for almost a year. Well, Gabby was a whore for popularity. Like anything that the popular kids would ask her to do, she would get on her hands and knees and do it. This woman did not care. Well, we had a project working up, so all 3 of us decided to work on it together. So I invited them over my house, and Gabby said that she needed to use the bathroom. So Bella offered to show her where the bathroom was. Probably 3 minutes later, Bella comes running up the stairs like she just saw a ghost. She was telling me that Gabby took all of her clothes off and tried making out with her. Well, that night they both spent the night. And I wake up in the middle of the night to Gabby pinning Bella to the wall trying to kiss her. But I went back to sleep and acted like nothing ever happened. Fast forward, it got to the point where Bella was actually feeling really unsafe, so her parents switched her schools.